My small wooden sailboat is fitted with a kick-up rudder. The blade is coated in Coppercoat Antifoul resin. People often think that the rudder blade is made of bronze. It is in fact marine ply. The aged Coppercoat patina and verdigris, caused by the oxidation of the copper powder suspended in the resin, does look quite a lot like bronze. In a few places, the rudder has been scuffed heavily enough to reveal the ply beneath, so I need to touch up the Coppercoat here and there.
I searched online for some guidance on how to do this. I found a lot of information on how to apply Coppercoat for the first time, but little on how to patch and reapply the antifoul. I contacted Coppercoat, who were very helpful, and discovered that the process for a reapplication is a little different to a first-time application. So I've made this video to share my findings.
Coppercoat is relatively expensive, so I ordered a small half-litre kit, which gives a coverage of approximately 1.75 square metres. The kit consisted of resin, hardener and fine copper powder. Coppercoat should be applied by spray or roller only, not by brush. I believe that using a brush leaves the copper at the bottom of the application layer rather than suspended throughout it. The kit also included comprehensive instructions. The sections of the rudder blade that needed touching up were small, so to avoid wasting precious Coppercoat, I cut my foam rollers to reduce their surface area. After detaching the blade, I prepared the surface. To ensure the new coating bonds well, Coppercoat recommend using 80 to 180 grit sandpaper to remove any green powder-like verdigris. The sanded areas should then be washed with fresh water, best not to let any Coppercoat go down the workshop plug hole, so I caught the waste in a bowl which I'll filter later on. Once the blade was completely dry, it was time to mix the Coppercoat. The resin and hardener mix ratio should be 1:1 by weight. This is where the process for reapplication differs from a first-time application. When touching up Coppercoat, the first coat consists of resin and hardener only. No copper powder is added. The second and subsequent coats should be applied while the drying coat is still tacky. How long it takes to become tacky will depend on the thickness of the coat and temperature. At 20 degrees, it will normally take an hour, but keep checking for tackiness. When mixing batches for the second and subsequent coats, the copper powder should be added. Mix 1 part resin and 1 part hardener together. Then add 4 parts copper powder. Mix thoroughly. Coppercoat should be applied directly after mixing and stirred regularly throughout the application process to prevent the copper from settling at the bottom of your container. The pot life of Coppercoat is approximately 40 minutes at 10 degrees centigrade, 30 minutes at 20 degrees and 20 minutes at 30 degrees. To avoid waste, I mixed just the amount I needed prior to applying each coat. I kept checking the tackiness of the drying coat to determine the right time to weigh and mix the next batch. It's important to apply Coppercoat just beyond the edge of the first resin and hardener coat. You don't want to leave any of the first coat exposed to the elements because it contains no copper and therefore has no antifoul capability. I applied 4 coats. Coppercoat recommend 4 to 5. Each coat was applied wet on tacky, and I cleaned the jar and tray and used a fresh roller with each coat. An elasticated cord holds the rudder blade in the down position. This sits in a groove at the top of the blade. I couldn't get the roller inside the groove far enough to apply sufficient Coppercoat. Dabbing with a brush worked really well. You're not supposed to brush Coppercoat, but dabbing into the groove applied the Coppercoat as if using a roller. While patching the rudder, I also tackled a couple of areas under the hull where the antifoul had been scuffed off. After 5 days of mild summer temperatures in the UK, the Coppercoat was fully cured. My next task was to burnish the surface with a fine Scotch-Brite pad to expose the copper powder and release the full potency of Coppercoat's anti-fouling capability. I burnished beyond the new application to blend the old with the new. Coppercoat recommend using a 400 to 600 grade sandpaper or a fine Scotch-Brite pad. I prefer the Scotch-Brite pad because it gets in between the stipples on the surface of the resin caused by the roller. Coppercoat is a low-leeching, water-based, solvent-free antifoul system that is considerably kinder to the environment than conventional self-eroding antifouls. It can easily last from 10 to 20 years with little maintenance, depending on the geographical region it's used in. After a while in the water and a bit of oxidation, the old and new patinas will begin to blend.
This video was all about the repair of an existing Coppercoat application. Antifoul systems differ in terms of their ease of use, performance, lifetime cost and environmental impact. Before choosing an antifoul system for a first-time application, make sure you do your research. There's a wealth of very useful information online.